Pro-Palestinian protests are set to resume when school is back in session in the fall. Attorney Ken Tashi is a campus reform higher education fellow and former adjunct instructor at Suffolk University. In his new op-ed, Ken warns university presidents that they are responsible for maintaining a safe learning environment for all students. Ken, welcome to the show.
Hey, Stacy, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's talk about this. We had a real display of a lack of leadership, a complete disregard for tuition paying families, parents. Some of these students are actually paying their own tuition. Some of them are taking out huge student loans to fund their opportunities at these elite universities. And the campuses are supposed to be lush with greenery and landscaping, replete with the knowledge of well learned professors and amazing networking opportunities. And instead, students had their movements limited. Some of them feared for their lives. And it was a stinky, nasty, disgusting place for them.
Oh, it sure was. And we saw that on full display last spring across the country, where presidents at institutions, both public and private, elevated the demands and the priorities of the mob over the interests and the rights of the vast majority of their students. And as a result of that, there was a significant impact on the teaching and learning environment on our college campuses. There was an impact on safety and security. Many institutions lost control of large portions of their campus, effectively making them no-go zones. There was occupation of buildings, extensive vandalism and damage. And I think we need to take these protesters at their word. They have spent the summer planning to reinitiate their disruptive protests come fall. And I hope that institutions are prepared for that storm that is approaching.
So the lack of preparation that we saw actually goes to something deeper, and that is the fact that a lot of these university presidents and their senior administration staff and the professors themselves identify with the anti-Semitic views that were really exploding across these campuses. So while the rest of the nation was in shock because the viewpoint is not held by 80% of Americans support Israel. So if you have a nation that really is kind of surprised by what they're seeing, their expectation is that someone in leadership will stand up to the students and say, you'll disperse this by 2 p.m. or the police will be here and any students who are arrested will also be expelled. And instantly it will be dispersed. But the protesters weren't, they didn't receive the threats. They didn't seem to care about the police coming in. And the administration was slow to make the statements. They were slow to respond to this really nasty, disgusting environment.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really unfortunate. But again, that was on full display by so many presidents around the country that just failed to step up and take that appropriate leadership role. And what I would have liked to have seen, particularly over this summer, I would have liked to have seen presidents around the country be very clear and issue an unmistakable statement. That first and foremost, the priority of our institution is a safe and secure learning environment. And any conduct that interferes with our achieving that goal will not be tolerated. They also should have indicated that while they respect First Amendment free speech rights and expression, particularly at public college campuses, there are limits to those rights. And if you exceed those limits, there will be consequences. And as president, I will unflinchingly enforce our policies under those circumstances. But unfortunately, we just haven't seen that. Most recently, the president of Columbia, which was the epicenter for student protests last spring, just issued a statement. And she said, in preparation for the fall, we're doing, among other things, a lot of listening. We're doing a lot of training. We're doing a lot of review of policies. We've identified 2 faculty that are going to serve as a listening board to effective students to better understand their views and their needs. All of which is wholly inadequate to address, again, I think, the onslaught of protests that we're going to see come fall.
A listening, what? A listening board?
Apparently.
So, I can, there's something that happens. This is, old parenting 101. When you have a toddler who has lost control of their emotions and they're having a tantrum and they're screaming, they're crying, they might not be kicking or flailing on the ground, but they've basically lost control of themselves and they're not able to regain control of themselves. You're literally in a situation where you have a separate entity, another human being with an amazing vocal range who is unable to control themselves. They can't calm themselves down. So you have to, as the parent, calm them down. If you say, "What do you need? How can I help you?" If you get at their level, if you lay on the floor with them, none of those things help, because the issue is they want to be under control, but they lack the ability to do so. And so the only thing that works is a change of scenery. You have to remove the child from that space, and the distraction of being in a new space, whether it's the car or outside or wherever it is that they were, they have to be removed from that place. And just that change of scenery gives them a distraction enough for you to begin to help them calm down. These protesters are in a sustained temper tantrum. It's of their own making, and they want to be violent. They want to be out of control, but they will go to the boundaries and the limits of whatever is set by the quote unquote adults in the space. And until we see campus administrators actually come out forcefully and say, if you lose control of yourself on my campus, you will be arrested, you'll be banned from campus, and we'll make your life miserable because we'll sue you. We'll find
Sure.
ways in which to make your life very difficult, and you'll be so busy fighting us in court, you won't have time to protest. We'll sue the organization that sponsored you. We'll find ways in
Sure.
which to make your life very difficult, and any students that participate will never be seen here again. All of a sudden, we'll have peace on campus again. It takes that kind of defined, solid response, and I'm not sure if these administrators have it.
Well, and part of this too is just a lack of consequences, right? I mean, if you violate college policies or state or federal law, there should indeed be consequences. But what have we seen around the country? We saw presidents last spring negotiating with protesters over their demands. We've seen institutions grant disciplinary amnesty to students who participate in illegal protests. We've seen district attorneys throughout the United States drop charges for, quote, lack of evidence against these individuals. So really, by negotiating with these students last spring, these faculty, or excuse me, these presidents may have gained some temporary cessation in hostilities, but really what they've done is simply incentivized future mob action, which is really what we're going to see come fall.
So in the fall, when the protesters come back, because they don't have anything to do, they're happy to protest. They're happy to ruin these campuses. When they come back, what should parents do? Because I didn't think I saw enough pushback from tuition paying parents last year either.
Well, one of the things that we have seen from parents and from students is in regards to litigation against many institutions for, among other things, civil rights violations that their students were subjected to as part of the intimidation, threats, and harassment that was occurring around the country of students. But there's also breach of contract complaints that have been brought against many of these institutions by parents and students who pay exorbitant amount of money in tuition and fees. And these institutions failed to fulfill so many of the promises and representations that they made. When they close down large portions of campus, when they cancel in-class instruction, when they cancel commencement, when they take other steps that deprive the majority of students of the benefits and services that have been promised, parents move forward and I think appropriately in litigation against many of these institutions. We're also starting to see parents be much more critical consumers of where their students are going to attend and where they're going to spend their education dollars. So those are important steps. If you're on a campus and you believe you're being subject to a civil rights violation, or your institution is just not providing a safe and secure environment, there are many organizations out there, like Alliance Defending Freedom, like Liberty Counsel, like Campus Reform, that can support those students and assist them in those circumstances. And this is going to take a big effort from a lot of individuals. And we've got to address it head on. And that's what that really starts with parents and students.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's going to take some prodding. Parents are probably going to have to show up in these administrators' offices and demand in groups. They're going to have to show up and say, look, there's 50 of us parents here. We all have kids here. Our kids are being harassed. We are going to remove them from this institution, and we're going to go to the media and talk about how you've stolen our money, you've stolen our kids' educational experience, and we're not going to put up with it. One thing we can count on is Campus Reform bringing us all of the latest information. Ken Tashi, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Stacey, thanks for having me.
All right, have a wonderful evening. Coming up, American infrastructure and manufacturing are at a standstill when the Navy can no longer build warships. I'll tell you more after this.